Hello, everyone. Welcome to Casual Watch Talk Sunday Social. Got a bit of a lighter crew today, but we've got the quality members. Hopefully, people will be joining as we go on, but it should be a interesting show.
We've got the engineering members here today.
Yeah,
well, all but one maybe, but yeah.
And we're like unofficially wearing a olive green uniform, unintentionally, or a dark green. Well, let's kick it off with a wristwatch check. So, Pete, what are you wearing?
Today I am wearing my Breitling Transocean. Hang on, there we go. So a 1972-ish integrated steel sports bracelet chronograph. An interesting thing. Came out basically the same time as the whole Gerald Genta Royal Oak thing. So not in any way, shape, or form shaped by that watch. It came out at basically the same time. But one of these watches I like owning because I love it. And it's also living proof that our history isn't quite what people think it is. They think that Gerald Genta created the integrated steel bracelet. It was, in fact, already a staple of design. He just made it really expensive.
I like that date at 4:30 where it looked like the date was the correct way on. It was sort of, yeah. Let me go that again. That's the first thing I love the date. I like the way it's sort of correctly orientated.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yep. Caliber 11, 12 feature right there.
No. This isn't a caliber 11. It's a manual wind. So okay. Value 7730, something like that. The little giveaway is, hang on a sec, we'll put it up again. The little giveaway is actually really obvious. The crowns are all on the same side.
They are. I looked at your fingernail. It looked like your fingernail was one of the crowns at first. Yeah. Never mind.
You have to put non-silver nail polish on next time. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, sympathy for the bezel. Yeah, they're it's an interesting. We went in that one, didn't we, Todd? The Disney Springs place. They've got some. They always have some interesting pre-owned ones. They had the Eye of the Tiger Rolex in there last time.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, it's
like, what are you going to do with that? I wonder, but it was fascinating to see one in the flesh.
Yeah, luxury. I think it's called Luxury of Time in Disney Springs.
Or
for us hardcore, Downtown Disney. I can't let that die. So welcome everyone. I think this is Ricky, and Ricky, if Dave's running any more late, you're duty bound to join us to take over. Thomas, nice. The price of watches increased, unfortunately. Yes. So this week's topic. Oh, actually, I didn't. Todd, I'm doing you an injustice here. I didn't do your wristwatch check.
Well, that's okay. I thought we were going to get to it. But so today I have something similar to Pete's. I've learned to do it here. Here we go. This is a vintage. They're all vintage, but this is a super good shape. And I'll get it. I put the camera in a different location, and I thought it would work better there. And I'm backing up. This is the Seiko Panda 6138 8020. From 1973, so this is 1 year younger than Pete's, and it's in fantastic shape. I have it with box and one of the instruction manuals, and on its original bracelet. And I like bracelets, so Pete and I differ in that a little bit, but it's nice to get this one, with most of its original material.
Awesome. And I've got my metal G-Shock on that I've been wearing all week. I was at a trucking show, so I took this, and it's kind of suited it perfectly. We've got our first hard-hitting comment here for Pete, which is, I hope this doesn't come across as rude, but why doesn't Pete use the Procaster that's behind him for these streams?
Because it's a pain in the ass to get all the I actually use that to record into a little recording box, and it's kind of a bit of a pain to set up to go directly into the laptop for live streaming.
Yes, and anyone should go to Brandrew's YouTube channel package for all your audio equipment reviews and tips. That's probably why he's asking the question. Also, Brandon, if you want to join this stream, let me know now, and I'll post the link in the chat if you want to jump on. Okay, so this week we are going to. This week we're probably one of the few channels that isn't talking about Timepiece Gentlemen. Although if anybody is interested in my view on it, I can always spin up the live stream after this. But Tim's going straight after this, so he's probably going to be covering the subject thoroughly. But for our live stream here, we are going to talk about things that things that changed as we got collected. So maybe things we didn't know at the start, but we know now. Maybe our attitudes changed to certain things. Maybe the industry changed, what changed, social media changed. So we've got a little list each of things that have changed, and then let us know in the comment section if you agree with us or if we missed any. So, shall I? Well, Pete, do you want to kick this off?
Yeah, I'll kick this off, largely because I stole it from Teddy Baldessar, and stole this idea from him. So I'm going to lead off, and I'm going to, I suppose I'll ambush Sam and say this is actually something slightly different to the one I told him about when I said, oh, my good things and bad things. But one thing that has changed, I joined this hobby in around about 2014, 2015 is when I started paying attention. And then the big change that I would say I've noticed as someone who uses and consumes and gets involved in media is all the big media platforms have stopped being media platforms and they've become watch sellers. So Hodinkee, Worn and Wound, Fratello, they've all become much more, they've kind of professionalized, but instead of professionalizing their journalism, they've professionalized their watch marketing. And I think I much preferred the slightly more rural, slightly more regional, slightly more beaten up around the edge, but much more authentic media that we had in 2015 than we have now.
Go on, Todd, what do you think on that one?
Yeah, that's as always, Pete has good observations. I seek his approval also, just to let you know.
Yes, there's this comment came through. Pete reminds me of my father-in-law. I don't know why, but I subconsciously seek his approval.
I don't know why. If I put on my wig and bring out the Hamel, then I won't care. But yeah, some of that bothers me for sure. And some doesn't. I guess I've been trying to wrestle with that a little bit. Like with Teddy Baldessar, I think he is now the rep for over 40 brands or something. Like, I mean, he's turned into just this huge cultural YouTube / whatever social media conglomerate now, probably with the help of Mr. Wonderful. And that's great. And so, but if he reviews a watch, chances are he's going to sell it in some fashion. So I don't think that that's as much of an issue for me as maybe some other YouTubers that are maybe kind of coming up with their own versions of watches that are in collaboration with somebody and so. And yeah, that bugs me a little bit because then you are kind of in a little bit of a pinch, I think, in terms of, are you, is there a conflict of interest and that sort of thing? I agree with what Pete says, but at the same time, I guess I'm not surprised that things evolve in this way. And sure enough, there's money to be had and what have you. And yeah.
I don't disagree. I remember when I first started, Hodinkee was obviously a really good resource. I remember when it launched and it seemed they were going for more of a slightly more polished, more classy kind of version of like the general watch, people writing articles online. It seemed like they had a lot of enthusiasts and things like that. And then they started doing the limited editions, which they got away with for a while. But I think when they did that travel clock, I think that was a huge turning point for them.
Yeah.
I think that left a really sour taste. They'd already been pushing their luck with some of the limited editions that they've been doing,
Right.
especially when they would take a G-Shock and hype it to the point that there was almost this frenzy of it.
Yeah, and to your point, I was just thinking, what if automotive journalists were to suddenly own dealerships and sell cars?
Yeah.
Would that be an equivalent piece here? And it might be. Maybe that is some kind of thought matrix here to look at that and say, okay, would that be allowed? Oh, this new Mustang, Shelby is great, and oh, by the way, come to my Ford dealership.
Yeah, and I suppose one on my list, I think that, sorry to skip your top, but that parlays into what Pete was saying, is that I think there's been this sort of birth of the superstar watch YouTuber. When we started off in 2015, this was pre Bark and Jack starting, and it was TGV was the most polished out of everyone. Everyone else was sort of somebody with a phone, or like I was doing. I had an old camcorder. It wasn't as polished. They were reviews, people's opinions and things like that, and they all looked a bit rough around the edges. Even Watchbox, even though Tim at Watchbox was arguably still to this day the most knowledgeable person in the whole of the YouTube scene, his stuff was really rough and ready. And it seems in recent years there's been this sort of superstar celebrity watch reviewer, Teddy being polished one, and obviously you got like Nico and a few of the others, where the reviews are now highly, a lot of high production value, excellent camera work, Bark and Jack and things like that. And the YouTuber has become the personality.
Right.
People not just tuning in to look at the watch; they're tuning into all content that the YouTuber produces, basically.
Right. But it also depends on the content they produce. I think is part of the situation. So one of my favorites that I still watch is Federico. And because he talks about the watch industry, he talks about trends, he talks about a lot of things that have nothing to do really with the fact that he sells pre-owned watches. Yeah. I mean, he does right up front, does the commercial thing, usually for 3 watches. And that's fine. I can go to his website and see, those 3 watches or whatever else, but that's not really his thing. He's not there. His personality and his, I guess, being relatively famous in the industry helps, I'm sure, Del Rey Watch sell watches, but he's not there reviewing watches that he's selling, really. And he's looking at the industry. So that's a different animal to me than, somebody else that may have some other insight and let's say, oh yeah, this new Z-Loss, and go to my website and you can get X number off my, the Z-Loss. That's a different animal, different YouTuber.
Yeah. I think also like Hodinkee, obviously they do their own limited editions, but also they like stealth shill a lot of stuff. I mean, their articles on Brew are verging on stealth adverts for Brew. They did this ridiculous one the other week where they did a showdown between 2 watches, and they were both Brew watches. It's like, that's not a showdown. That's not like
that's right.
Watches going head to head. You basically, I don't know if somebody else has ever coined this term, but I called it shilvatorial. So advertorial, but shilvatorial articles, which
copyright.
Yeah, there's actually, I did a video on something like this, and you could see a perfect example of how both the brand and the media outlet sort of worked hand in hand to do this with Hodinkee and the relaunch of Tudor, where a year or so before, Hodinkee's existed since 2008. From 2008 to 2011-ish, there was not a single article on Tudor. Tudor didn't exist there was no, remember the good old days of the Submariner, and remember how we loved this brand so much that it had to leave the market. There was none of that. Then suddenly, for no apparent reason, purely from the goodness of his heart, 12 months before Tudor comes back to America, articles start appearing. Remember the Tudor Submariner. Remember the Tudors of yore. And then in the next 12 months, there was something like 18 articles around Tudor. And then there was the whole, we've traveled to Europe and seen the new Black Bay. And then it was, shock horror, you'll never believe, we're opening a comments forum and channel with Tudor, and we're part of their sort of distribution chain for the next, however long. It's got to the point now where if I look at Hodinkee and see a remember this watch, and I am absolutely convinced that Breitling probably just gave him a bucket load of money, because they just ran an article, remember the old aerospaces. So for me, that's a sign that, there's a new aerospace coming in the next 12 months.
Yeah. It's a really interesting point. Is we've had some pretty interesting comments that have come through. This might be the whole show. I've got a list of other stuff, but this might actually.
Yeah, we'll go. Move on.
So Brandrew, who I'll just plug it again, Brandrew, if you want to join, let me know. I'll put the link in the chat. I understand people's ethical concerns about Teddy, but from the outside, everything seems above board. Perhaps his video covering what he sells shouldn't be called reviews, though. This is an interesting point. Teddy's been on a trajectory. I mean, he started out, he was playing the game of the YouTube. He started out doing the top 10 lists, then he did his reactions, and then he did, I think, and then he obviously he always had like a production value, because you could tell the videos that he did himself, the audio was just terrible at the start of it, and mine was as well. Like my audio was awful at the start, but you could tell there was a distinctive between there's other people that are recording this. But I agree, Teddy's great for I think of him as like an ambassador for the watch review community, isn't he? He's like the polished sort of reluctant to say politician, but he's like the representative, isn't he? He's slick. He does an excellent job. If you're getting into watches, he also has a lot of excellent content, like what is a watch and what is it? He does that type. So he does fill a need. He's less. You do get, although it's less. You feel like you're not getting his genuine opinion on things. They're more like, it polished, almost something you would see on a TV or something like that. A proper presenter. So anyway,
yeah, Dave is right. I think Scottish or Ricky, whoever from Scottish Watches, is right. I remember seeing Teddy first as like a men's, doing some sort of men's dress, that sort of thing, and then watches were, I think, a brief part of it, and then he did pivot right into it rather well.
Yeah. I mean, we could analyze media, and we've all done it. It's kind of fun. I'd say it's also become increasingly beginner focused. It's become increasingly SEO driven. Yeah. And that there's a real. If you want to blow your channel up, say incredibly uncontroversial things in a very controversial way, with high production values. So Nico is like it. He's never said anything remotely insightful. It's if you trawled through like the worst parts of Reddit and found like the big group think, you've basically got the script of a Nico Leonard video. But then get someone charismatic to present it, and you'll go nuts.
Yeah, and that's what he's also feeding that that sort of bridge between like the TikTok. I liken it to that old film Max Headroom, where they had the blip verts that made people's heads explode. It's that the quick cuts. He's feeding into that sort of the short form content, but he's making it slightly longer. And obviously he's doing a good. I mean, that's obviously what a lot of people are liking. And it also feeds into. And I don't know whether this is sinister, maybe not a sinister side of it, but I think there's definitely some of his videos, like you're saying, they're not controversial, but they focus on something that I've thought about for a long time, which is there is definitely a part of the viewership that view watch content, and I'm talking about that the high value watch stuff, that would like to think that people who have a very expensive watches are either don't know what they've bought, or they've somehow got them through illicit means, or they're flexing and they don't, there's this bridge about how those sort of luxury pieces, and Nico does a good job of that, where he's taking on, take on some of like the blingy jewelry people, won't he? Or like the celebrities and stuff like that. And he feeds into that, because he'll have his best videos are, oh, this celebrity that was flexing this watch, that watch is fake. And I think that's a lot of people like, oh wow, that's why they have these things. It's because they're fakes, not that there's not that there's they've worked all their life and saved up for this one Rolex. It's so I find that interesting. Yeah, and then so I'll just go through a couple. So Peter saying Fed approaches the conversation from the perspective of a dealer, which is actually good, I think. And then Brassic Time says a lot of YouTubers are little more than shills for brands with which they have some sort of relationship with, and shamelessly plug accordingly, if only to hype watches they own. I don't really agree with that.
I don't know.
Also, I come in right from a different perspective, because I get sent watches, but I'm very selective about what watches I'll take in for review, because but there's a couple of reasons for this. Gone are the days where I actually had this point on my list here. I'm talking way more than I should, way more than I normally do on a live stream. Sorry, guys, but I had this on my list, which is a hit watch historians. So when you start off in YouTube, we are very passionate about watches, and there's certain watches that you find that nobody's perhaps seen before. And then Patrick, who normally joins us Pocket Watch Time, does this all the time. He has incredibly interesting watches, and he'll make a video on it, and nobody will watch it because people aren't interested. The mass, there's only a subset of a subset of a subset that are interested truly in these interesting watch. Oh, this is an interesting watch. The mass part of the watch viewing public are interested in watching reviews of watches they own. This is why back in the day, I used to go like to a lot of nightclubs and stuff, and I used to have a lot of friends that were DJs, and they always had a problem with playing their own music in clubs, because the people that were in the club like to sing along, or they like to dance to songs that they already know. And I think that's very similar in the watch world, where it's, hey, I'm familiar with this brand, or I own this brand. I like to watch content around this brand. So you end up having to be, as a watch YouTuber, taking, unless you're really pumping out the content like Jody at Just One More Watch, where he can feed in like these watches that nobody's heard of and people will watch them. Whereas for like bread and butter YouTuber like me, where I'm doing 1 or 2 reviews a week perhaps, it's harder to do that. So you do end up gravitating towards the more well-known brands, or going towards brands that you think, hey, somebody's going to find this interesting, or this might get the views. Because if you spend in 8 or 9 hours on it, I've spent all day doing 2 reviews today, 8 or 9 hours doing a review, and then you're only getting a couple of hundred views on it, it kind of skews your whole feed. It kind of throws the YouTube algorithm off. So I think you have to be careful. I don't think it's necessarily shilling brands. It's having to focus on specific brands or not. I mean, I could just do really well just doing Rolex reviews all the time. So, but anyway, didn't really answer the question. Sorry, I talked loads then.
Yeah, that's where I was heading when I was talking about like SEO driven. I think a lot of the media is now, we've become aware of what happens when we cover certain things. It's like, to your point, I've got a couple of watches which are not in any way, shape, or form what I'd say sort of obscure. But go and jump on the internet after this, fellas. Keep watching the stream, and do a search for a review of a JLC Polaris. They're just not out there. And it's not, and I've got a Polaris, and I'm going to get around to reviewing it one day, and I don't really like doing watch reviews, so that's one of the reasons. But the other reason is I know for a fact it's not going to be a big review piece. It's going to be, I'll get a couple of hundred views. That's about it. Not a lot of people own the watch, therefore not a lot of people are going to go watch the reviews, which actually says something interesting about everyone's complaining about, maybe even my complaining about reviews. If people are really only watching the reviews of watches they already own, then what's the harm in shilling them? I strongly suspect that 99% of people that go and get their pitchforks and firebrands and want to burn the place down are actually not angry because they were tricked into buying a watch they didn't want, but rather a watch they don't like had something nice said about it, and they think that they should have said something nasty about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I try and be as honest as possible in my reviews, but I mean, I would admit that most of them are verging on verging mostly on positive, but it's because I don't review everything that I get. I mean, I wouldn't have time to. I get at least 3 or 4 requests per day to review watches, but I only review watches that I like the look of, and I've got a good sense of my own taste now. So I wouldn't have somebody send me a watch so that I could slate it, because I don't think it's fair on anyone. I mean, there's definitely watches that I thought were good, and even my favorite brand, Christopher Ward, you will see reviews that I have done where I have not praised some of their watches. I've actually been quite there's certain design choices that they made about things that I have not been complimentary about in my reviews. But anyway, let's just
I think it's time for, I was going to say, Seiko Todd, what's changed in your world? I don't think you've had a chance
we
yet.
haven't had you yet. We've actually got a bunch of questions coming through on that first.
That's fine. We can still entertain questions or whatever.
Yeah. But, okay. Well, actually, okay. Well, I'll throw this hand grenade in your direction then, Todd. Question for the panel, a little sensitive. Do you think any of the long-term YouTubers have gotten bigger egos over the years?
Oh, yeah, especially absolutely the ones that have British accents.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Huge.
To save me like dominating the conversation on this, I regularly chat to. I've changed my opinion on some of the bigger YouTubers after speaking to them. So not that I ever changed my opinion on Adrian at Bark and Jack, but if you speak to him, he is super nice guy. They are all super nice. Ricky and Dave at Scottish Watches, awesome, very helpful behind the scenes. The community is not so big that the egos dominate it. Although, to be fair, I have been shut down by some of the YouTubers, like thankfully, some of the ones that are perhaps not as prominent now, but they were a while ago. Also, TGV is a really nice guy to speak to and chat with as well. I've chatted to him multiple times. I message him on the regular. I think his channel, especially the Facebook group, just exploded, and it just wasn't that sort of one-to-one interaction. Like if you message me on Instagram, I will message you back. Anybody in the chat that knows that, or any of the guys. I mean, everyone on here either was a subscriber to my channel, or we struck up a friendship on social media. So I think he just got too big. But anyway,
I'd agree with that. I can't think of a single YouTuber that I have interacted with that I haven't enjoyed interacting with. There's some who, for whatever reason, we just do different things. We go in different directions. But and I've never even thought to reach out to them. But for the others, it's, even though they've been massive and I'm tiny, everyone gives you time, everyone talks, everyone's nice. This is sort of another example. I think a lot of people have adopted to run their channels, I think, and to do their channels, a lot of people have adopted a kind of a character. It's not a million miles away from who they are, but it's kind of who they are, but with some of the nasty bits rubbed off and, some of the edges sort of smoothed out a bit. Yeah. And then who they are and what they like to collect and where they like to go sort of becomes part of the character. And then a lot of the audience decide they either do or don't like that character. And then they must imagine that that's what the person is like.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the biggest example of that, and Ricky's spoken to him. I've never actually even spoken to the guy, but Paul Pluter, the guy behind Archie, is a really stunning example. You know, quite deliberately, he created a cartoon character. But I think there's a lot of people who are in that position. I think I suppose as a YouTuber, I see a lot of those sorts of comments. Everyone's a secret shill. Everyone's receiving these, these spare watches. It's actually not that common, except in a couple of, I think deep down in the affordable space, I think there's a lot more of that goes on. I think there's more, and I don't play there much, so this is me from the outside. I'd be interested in your view, Sam. I think when people, those startups who are offering you watches, wanting to get a leg up, I think they're much more willing to hand over cash.
Yeah, I mean, I've never. There is YouTubers that 100%, and Bennett Ben's Watch Club did a little bit of expose on this. I know there's YouTubers that accept cash for reviews, well-known ones, and I've never done that. So the microbrand thing is interesting, isn't it? Because I've reviewed a lot of microbrands and actually thought that at the time, I've got another microbrand on here just because I like the guys when they chatted to me, but I turn a lot of them down now because it's difficult to get the views. I think if you're a microbrand, Jody at Just One More Watch is your best avenue. I don't think he charges for reviews, but if anybody's watching this that has a microbrand, he is I think your best avenue for it, because he is, not only does he do an excellent job of his reviews, but also he's well known for that. He is sending it to a channel like mine is Watch Chris, of course. Watch Chris, sorry, I'm doing Watch Chris a disservice. Watch Chris also is another great person for helping on microbrands.
I would have thought if you had a microbrand now, particularly one that was sort of just starting up, you didn't have a lot of production or original design, you were going to rely a lot on homages, I'd be looking at probably Revolution.
Right. Yeah, interesting.
And get Waco to call you one of the great designers of the last 5 years.
Yeah, it's I think also So Brandrew's got a good point here. If you get paid to make a video and calling that video a review is very ethically ambiguous move. This is one of the interesting things, isn't it? Because I think about this as the watches that I kindly get sent in. I don't like having a large watch collection, so I in fact I give away easily 50%. I gave away 3 last week, or I'll sell them on eBay, and I know that sometimes rubs people up the wrong way. And I think of it like I've reviewed it, and therefore I've done the review, and it's moved on. It's like a restaurant reviewer; they don't eat at the same restaurant every single day. You're not like, oh, you ate at that restaurant once and you recommended it, but have you been back? So I think of it like that. I don't think of it as, but you're right. If nobody's ever paid me to do a review, and it would be, I think you would have to call it a showcase or something like that, wouldn't you? Or a promotional. This was promoted. Whereas in any other industry, like the makeup YouTubers, like the car reviewers and all of that, they're raking in the big bucks doing it. I think it's just weird I think not just weird in our community, but it's one of the things. Anyway, I've talked way more than my quota. Todd, go on. You kick us off with a fresh topic. What's one of yours that's changed?
Yeah, something that's egos and watch YouTube folks, who knows, right? But in terms of that sort of thing, although I would say to my introduction to YouTube, because I was researching a Hamilton watch when I was early in my collecting days, and the first guy I bumped into as I was just beginning to discover this on YouTube was Archie, and I'm like, what is this? this is awful, so luckily I didn't stop there. Otherwise it would have been a short collecting journey.
Yeah.
But in terms of what is, I think in terms of, I think Pete brought this up on one of his too, that's related, one of our questions, right? What's changed in the length of time that we've been collecting? How have we changed? How have we approached this mind-numbing, expensive, frivolous hobby in some way, right? And I think for sure, you said it once, Sam. So the price of watches no longer alarms me like it did in the beginning, and that scares the heck out of me. I mean, I can look at a watch now, and I can say, "Oh, actually, $8,000 is pretty decent for that." Yeah, I can start thinking in that way, which to me is, in many ways, is, and it's great to see David too. I agree with that. It's funny how that is, because I remember like some of my first watches were like a Citizen Echo Drive chronograph, and then I think I also got a Bulova, one of their like $150 Bulova thing at one time, and I started with Seikos too, and Turtles, and all those are great entry drugs, and you're spending $350 for a watch, and you're like, oh my goodness, a little bit like at the time it was luxury, a little bit like Pete was remarking in terms of, yeah, that hurt a little bit just thinking about spending that much for a watch. And then I see, Dave shows up with a Snoopy Omega Seamaster, Speedmaster. I'm like, whoa. And I'm still saying whoa, but I'm like, could I possibly figure that out?
Fair.
So that's the weird thing about it now for me, for sure. My wife would say, another watch. What did that cost? Oh, that was only $2,000, honey. It was a deal, and she'll look at me, but yeah. Anyhow, and these are vintage watches, which aren't nearly as expensive as new ones usually, right? But
I had that on my list. But Dave, welcome today.
Welcome, Dave.
Apologies for being half-time, Harry.
Well, you actually missed our. We were almost created our own YouTube watch drama here, talking about other YouTubers. So you missed that bit. But what's, I guess, Dave, what do you think on that, the watch prices? Because I'm totally on board with the first time that I considered paying $800 for a watch, I was stewed on it for like 3 or 4 weeks. Like, oh my god, what am I doing?
Yeah, I guess like anything, it's relative to your situation to a certain extent as well. If you are young and come from money or access to money, then your relative grading of what is and isn't expensive is entirely different to if you come from less money or no money, So you've always got to, I guess, build that into context. And then you've got to build in, I guess, the context of perception of value and almost like the ethics of how you're brought up to a certain extent. There's some people I know that have been brought up who come from money, who are not given money when they're young and told, you want money, it doesn't grow on trees, go make your own and work out what it's worth and what it's not worth. Others who are given everything that they've ever desired on a plate and therefore have zero context of what is or isn't cheap or expensive. But I think for me, it's as you learn more about, I guess, for me, certainly artisanal craft, and for the certain je ne sais quoi that you can't quite put a true value on, in terms of the older I've got, the more I value the things that aren't tangible. As in, when you're young, you're like, but that lump of metal surely can't be worth 10 grand when I can buy another lump of metal that does the same thing for $200. How can you justify that? And as you get older, you start to appreciate, like, when you go out to a nice restaurant and you go, why is the bill $500 versus being $50? And it's because the guy is a guy, or woman for that matter, is artisanal and a craftsmanship at what they do, and they can just do that certain something that you can't get in a McDonald's. Or when you buy a car whose engine's been tuned by that one guy who just knows how to get that extra little bit of performance out the engine that the rest of the world can't. That for me is where you begin to value with watches. Conversely to that, for me, what you begin to realise is brands that charge you a lot of money because they think they A, can, and B, their name has got value, and it depends how much. And that's why for me, Rolex doesn't do very much. Do they make a nice watch? Yes. Do they hold value because of some weird little kind of bubble in the world that says Rolex is better than everything else? Yes. But is the product worth the price they charge for it? No, in my opinion, it isn't. It's worth it if you want to buy it to resell it, because that's a different game. But if you're buying it for the craftsmanship that was made to produce that, I believe there are better things you can buy for your money, put it that way. So I think that's where it is for me. But then weirdly, the more you spend, the more you understand how good you can get something for that doesn't cost a lot of money. You think, look how little that costs and how good that actually is for that little amount of money, whether it's a Swatch watch or a G-Shock or something mechanical from, say, Seiko, where you look at it and you go, how can they produce like a watch at $600 that you think, that's a bloody good watch that's accurate and it's well made and it's well finished and it will last longer than probably all four of us put together in the real world. So that's kind of my take on it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think the there's a whole bunch that goes on. There's a little bit of, we just get, the boiling frog thing. We all just get a little bit used to prices as they get more expensive. We just, I'm absolutely guilty of that. I think I totally agree with Dave that particularly as we get, and this is a split in the community, people go in different directions. There are those people who have been in this hobby for 10 years, sold everything and do nothing but micro brands now. And then there's the people that just sort of slowly start spending more money and moving up the chain. And I think a lot of cases, the difference is how much value people put in what I call the story of a watch. So it's one thing to look at a lump of metal and say, test it, and this is how accurate it is, this is how accurate this one is, this is how shiny this one is, this is how shiny that one is. But the story is all the stuff about, but someone used their hands to make this as opposed to running it through a machine. Physical inspection of the item doesn't show you that, but and that's kind of my definition of story. If looking at the watch doesn't make it absolutely clear, if someone has to tell you, then it's story. So
yeah.
In-house manufacture, Swiss made, artisan made, only 5 of these in the world, all of that story stuff, you become more and more attuned to, or a lot of us do, as we stay in this hobby, and we're prepared to pay for it.
Unless you kind of get to the stage where you demarket the product, I think everyone goes through a stage where you believe, pardon my French, you believe the bullshit. You're like, okay, somebody says it's better, therefore it is better. And everyone, I don't care who you are, everyone falls for it to some extent, less, more at some stages, whatever it may be. I like Speedmasters. But I love the whole 1950s, 60s, 70s moon space program, NASA, Roscosmos, the whole lot. That's my thing. And of course, you fall for the BS. Is there some truth to the narrative? Sure. Is a lot of it absolute codswallop made up by someone sitting in a marketing office getting paid an awful lot more money than I do? Sure, of course it is. But you fall for it, and that's part of why we, like Pete, you're pretty... I think it's fair to say you're not the most gullible when it comes to marketing, but I'm looking at your background there and you've got exactly the same microphone stand as me. And, why did you buy that one? Because it looks quite nice and it's probably better than all the others. Is it? Probably not, but it looks cool anyway, And so we all fall for it to a greater or less extent. And I'm laughing because actually Seiko Todd, see the one you've got, that is the one that I also have, that I was like, that's probably the sensible suggestion to buy it. But yeah, exactly. So I think you're right in that way. But for me, I've seen a couple of ridiculously priced watches, and I'm talking Grubel Forze architecture. I've had one in my hand maybe a year ago when they just launched it, and it's just shy of $500,000 Swiss francs plus tax. So we're not even talking expensive. We're talking whole different world of kind of accessibility. But weirdly, after I came away from it, I was like, now if I had £500,000, I could see my, because things that you can't see in pictures or renders or anything, and you hold it in your hand and you start looking at it and you've got a loop in your eye and you're just looking at it, and there's certain things, of course there's marketing, but they're going, oh, like, there's just certain things about that watch you think, holy Christ, this is something that nobody needs and is anarchic in its own value as a watch. But you're like, somebody has spent like months of their life polishing something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's literally like an analogy. It was quite funny. Somebody who was there, who will remain nameless, said it's kind of like it's like going to the toilet and wiping your butt, then having a doctor come in and wipe your butt, then having a surgeon come in and wipe your butt, and then having it cleaned, like beyond cleaning, going, probably could do with a bit more finishing to make sure it's clean. He said that's the watch equivalent of this. And then you suddenly go, if you want to pay someone who's got that amount of skill to do that and take that amount of time to do it, then that's how much it costs. Time and skill equals cost. And that's unfortunately what most people are unwilling to pay for, because, yeah, but you could get it just as good for a lot less money. Yeah, but it's not as good. And if you want that 1% of 1%, that's where the price doesn't go that, it goes like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It takes them 6 months to polish, but 15 years to get good enough for it to really take them 6 months.
Well, 15 years to get to the point where someone says that you might be trusted to do it, so you can practice for another 25 years before you're actually allowed to do one that someone's allowed to buy. Yeah,
15-year apprenticeship.
And I've been lucky enough I've seen it in person. Like I went to, where was it? I was in Switzerland and I went to see Mont Blanc. And they obviously own or have custodianship of Minerva. And in the original Minerva building, in the top floor is where they still do the ultra high-end handmade, and by handmade, truly handmade Minerva movements. And there literally was an old lady, and she's easily in her late 60s, early 70s, and all she does is anglage. She literally sits polishing anglage. And they're like, when does she work? And you look at even the managers and they go, well, she kind of works whenever she feels like it. And like, if she decides, if she comes in, she might polish for 20 minutes and go, I don't feel like it today. And she just walks out. She's like, I'm away to feed my cows. And she says, but they said, we still to this day, we can't get a machine to do it. And we haven't found anybody else who can do it as well as she does it when she's on game. And if you want to charge someone 6 figures plus for a watch, then that's what you have. And you've got one person that you more or less have to pay them whatever they decide they want to pay, or you pay them X amount and you understand that they'll work whenever they feel like working.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a great point that. Pete, I mean, did you have another one on your list, things that have changed since you started collecting, or have you changed? Or
okay. I'm going to say a good thing, and this is sort of when I got into collecting. So again, sort of 2015, 2016, the Black Bay had been around for a couple of years. The things like the Super Ocean Heritage had been around for about 10 years. The Longines Legend Diver had been about 10 years time. But the Black Bay had come along and had sort of really put a fire under the idea of the 1950s kind of retro revival. And so for the vast bulk of my time in watches, we've been on this, my opinion, horrible, mid-century, mundane, just reproducing very bland watches for a long period of time. But over the last 2 years, that's begun to break free, and designers, they're still looking back in time. That's absolutely true. But they're looking back at more interesting times. We're seeing watches coming from the 40s and the 20s and the 30s. We're seeing watches coming from the late 60s and the early 70s. So whilst we are still seeing retro designs, they're not in this very narrow 15-year period between 1950 and 1965. They're now covering a much greater span. And I think we are so much better for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah,
I think the other big thing with people is that people's value perceptions are strange because of the general, I guess, world we live in nowadays, where everything's, I pay for it, I want it immediately. Nothing should take any time. Everything has a degree of disposability to it. Mechanical watches are ludicrously difficult to make, even cheap ones. Let's not, like in the grand scheme of, consumer product, mechanical watches are like the most stupid thing that any person would think of as a sensible, profitable business model of let's make something that realistically has to be made to the accuracy of microns, which in its own fact, consistently making things within a couple of microns is not easy. The aviation industry likes to think they're precise, and they are, because people fall out the sky if they're not. But they don't work to 1 or 2 microns. They work to microns usually in the double digits or maybe 3 digits, but they certainly don't work to 1 or 2 microns. When you've got something that's that size, on your wrist that comprises of X hundred or potentially verging on 1,000 components, some of which are absolutely minuscule and have got basically zero tolerance for being out of spec if you want it to be COSC certified or whatever. The machinery and the knowledge and the know-how and the engineering that you need to do that is ludicrous. Most industries would just be like, don't even think about trying to engineer something like that. That's just gross stupidity. And the fact that you can buy something like that for as little as what these days probably $400 or $500 you can buy a pretty accurate watch is amazing. But you have to do that in volume, big volume, to make a watch be able to be sold at that kind of price point. If you want to actually do super small batch, ultra high, everything, then it escalates rapidly.
Yeah, I know there's people talking about the Salita factory being hit by a tornado or whatever, and will that affect all of these different watch brands? And there's not many industries where it's like one place. If one place something happens to it, it could disrupt an entire, like, multiple different companies that rely on this one singular supply chain.
I found myself thinking when that happened. And Dave, you might I might get the name of the factory wrong, but if it had been like the Niverox factory, the guys that make the hairsprings, that would have shut everyone down. There's maybe 3 or 4 brands that make hairsprings and mainsprings, but I think they make something like 98% of them.
If Niverox had been hit, then you would have had fundamentally industry-wide challenges. As you say, there's a handful of people that do hairsprings. Niverox are one of the main industry partners in terms of who also give their knowledge stroke products to other brands. There's a few guys who do it but for themselves. If it had been balance wheels or balances, there's pretty much one game in town. And if they'd been hit, then the whole industry would have been like, oh, okay, we have a fundamental problem. It'd be like somebody saying there's no more steel anywhere in the world, and the shipbuilding industry saying we seem to have a bit of a problem.
Right. And we see that, though, in other industries. Like when we had, I think it was around COVID time, I didn't know this. It turns out in the U.S., there's 3 factories that make baby food. I had no idea that and I'm big into manufacturing and supply chain stuff too, and I'm like, really? And then one of them goes down, and then one of them had a bacterial explosion of some sort. You got one, and then all of a sudden you can't buy baby food and we don't have any babies in the house anymore. It's been a while, but I mean, we have friends that just had babies, and they're like, listen, I have to get this one kind. It has, because of the tolerance factors, something. And she said, I can't find it. I don't know what to do. She was genuine, and this is in the U.S., right? She was genuinely just very, very concerned, almost on the point of panic, because she couldn't find it. And she called us and she said, hey, do you have any up there? We're starting to do the phone chains to find this specific brand of baby food. And then, but you see it in other places. My dad was a chemical engineer, so I learned a lot about about the petroleum industry, because he was in that area of things. And if you want antifreeze, I think in the U.S. at one point there was one cracking plant that made ethylene glycol. If it goes down, and it did once, I think, for some problem, all of a sudden antifreeze tripled in price, overnight virtually. And so it's weird. We do have these sorts of things, but I would argue that those are necessities, to David's point. if we lose hairsprings, we're going to buy Seiko's, number one. Number two, because they make their own, they make everything. Number two, or Rolex, maybe. I don't know if they get their own or not. But I mean but it's optional, right? It's an optional. All this screwy mechanical craziness we have on our wrist is optional, but we still have a problem with that in things that count. Microprocessors, right? We've learned that over COVID, right? There's not enough microprocessing plants. They're all in Taiwan, and now the supply chain gets disrupted, and your Ford truck is useless because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I my day job is in trucking, and if the truck drivers decided just to not go anywhere, they think it's like 3 days before there's serious issues, because almost
there's a phrase I wish I could have uttered sometime in my life. Sometimes, Sam. I work in trucking.
Trucking.
Yeah. I'll send you some
10-4, big buddy.
Yeah. They don't let me drive a truck. But, we're
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
Although, I have driven shotgun, and many times on the the actual.
I've driven a tank once briefly, but we won't talk about that. That's a whole another. Yeah.
The backbone of America, the truck drivers. So, okay. So I've forgotten where we are. Dave, did you have one? What something that's changed for you since you started watch collecting?
Podcast that explode.
No, I guess what's changed. I guess my perceptions of what has value has changed. I think when you're early into it, it tends to be quite aspirational, although that never really goes away, but it's quite aspirational in that, for most people, me included, you start at a level that's commensurate to with whatever you earn. So, most folk in life don't earn so much when they're young, and as they get older and technically more experienced better at what they do, which is a broad generalization, but your kind of salary increases proportionally with that, and therefore you get access to more. So you're always, when you're young, I guess, aspiring to, you maybe start with Seikos and G-Shocks and Swatch watches and these kind of things, and you maybe aspire to, I'd love to have an Omega or a Rolex or a whatever brand it is, XYZ, and then as you kind of get to those levels, they become your norm and you begin to aspire up the way. I think for most people, a point comes where you're like, actually, stop looking up the way, start looking out the way, as opposed to just kind of aspiring to the more I spend, the better it gets. And you learn quite quickly, well, hang on a minute, those Olympic athletes and film stars don't come cheap. Therefore, I'm subsidising the income of a broad swathe of people who don't need more money than I do. And you begin to kind of look out the way and go, okay, what else is there? You begin to, I guess, look back the way and go, I remember the days when I used to just buy X, Y, or Z. And you think, actually, they're pretty cool, actually. And you start to focus on that again. And I think you begin to become much more focused in terms of where you perceive value. Now, that value might still be aspirational. Like people say to me, like, oh, what's your... I don't believe in this, but everyone or lots of people in watch world love to say, "What's your Grail watch? What's your end game?" My end game is like probably I'll be in a box before I reach my end game, so that's not a real question. But if someone said to me, "What is it?" I'd be like, "A Grubel Forze World GNT. Thank you very much." But am I ever, even if I literally take on all of your incomes and simultaneously, while putting you in a box, take on all your incomes, am I buying a £500,000 plus tax watch? No, it's not happening. And would I want to? Probably not either, because I guess it's like the old thing, never meet the film stars that you idolise, yada, 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 because they're all just idiots anyway, like we are. So I think for me, it's about narrowing the field of where you see value and where you see something. And I don't care what that is. It could be something ludicrous. It could be just having more substance to what you focus on, as opposed to just being like, it's a watch. I think we all go through that phase of, ooh, new, shiny, must buy that. And you're like, why did I buy this?
Yeah, all the painting by numbers. When you first start out watch collecting, you sort of painting by numbers. Oh, I need a dive watch, I need a pilot watch, I need a dress watch, and you kind of, trying to.
No, you don't.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah.
I've never worn a
I
dress
mean,
watch.
it's like it's like the older sibling or the parent or the older friend telling you this is what's going to happen in your life, and you don't believe me, but this is all the things that you're going. This is all the mistakes you're going to make, and this is how you're going to make them, and I'm going to tell you how to avoid it. You still make those mistakes, and I guess you only ultimately find what you like by making those mistakes. I think I'm a great believer in it's not the right decisions that you necessarily make in life that get you to the right place. It's the ones that you only learn which food you don't like or which food you like by trying them. And if you don't try things, you don't like it. And I think that's the same with watches. There's been many watches that I've tried. I've thought this is very not me, and thought actually this turns out to be more me than I really would like it to be. But hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I totally agree. That's
I was going to say, I sort of half agree with what Dave said and half don't. But then that's also because,
Of course you do, Pete.
yeah, yeah, that's true. No, and I think you're absolutely right for the vast bulk of people that come into this hobby. I think the reason why I've always approached watch collecting a little bit differently is because I came in as a watch collector. I sort of started thinking about being a watch collector in my late 40s after having collected cars, after having collected a whole bunch of other things. And so I didn't need someone else telling me these are the mistakes you're going to make along the way, because I'd already done that 3 or 4 times, albeit in different fields. So from the day I decided to buy myself a watch, I remember I'm sitting there scanning through Amazon at the time because I didn't know about the rest. And I saw all this stuff I liked. And I actually sat down and said to my wife, this is about to get ugly. I know who I am. I know how this plays out. And so I was able to sort of sit down and sort of map out a pretty good idea of kind of who I am and where I'm likely to end up. And I think that's the one part where I'd say I disagree a little bit with what Dave said. I do agree. There always has to be some trial and error. But I think a lot of people, particularly when they're younger in this hobby, are buying watches not for who they are, but who they would like to think they were. And I think if I was going to give anyone, and I did a video on this, if I was going to give any person, some advice when they're going to buy their first watch, is go into a room of mirrors, have a really long, hard look at who you really are, and make a list of what's actually important to you. Not what other people have told you is important, not what you wish you would be, but who you really are. Get comfortable with that, and you'll probably be able to buy watches you like.
The problem with that, Pete, is that's exactly the kind of thing that comes with being a 50-something adult.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You've got to screw up a lot before you're actually able to go into that room of mirrors.
What did you say? You made the same mistake with cars and then something before that? I think someone I know told me the first time you make a mistake, it's a learning point. The second time you make it, the second mistake you make is reflection. The third time is the definition of an idiot.
Yeah. I think I've just avoided that last one. Just barely.
Just wait till you collect. Wait till you start on the Pokemon cards, mate. That's where it comes.
No.
Crazy. Well, that's been really good. I mean, I thought we kind of went over a little bit there. I don't know if there's any final points. I know, Pete, you've probably got.
Pete has lots of stuff.
I think, what else has changed? The creation of the watch investor collector, I think, there was no such thing in 2015. And according to Watch Pro, I think they now estimate that the watch investor collector is responsible for something like 40% of watch sales.
Yeah.
So I think that has really shifted the market. It's really interesting. I'd love to be able to put all this in one place for a little while and say, if the watch investor collector is now making up around about 40% of watch sales, watch sales in the United States have absolutely exploded over the last few years, but also 40% of watch sales in America, 40% of the money spent on watches in America goes to Rolex. I think all of those sit next to each other. I think that the watch investor collector is a very American thing, and that has fundamentally distorted a lot of the market.
Yeah, it could be. I think I've seen this with the automotive, like being a car guy, like you talk about, Pete, since I can remember, since before I could drive. You saw at one point when the what we call well, I'm trying to think, I can't think of it, but like Ferraris, certain Lamborghinis, the exotic cars, right? So the exotic car industry, because they are low quantities anyway, had a collector mindset. You're a Ferrari guy, da 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 da. And then at one point, when those got so expensive, the collector industry went to muscle cars. So I remember when I was playing around with Camaros and Mustangs and that sort of thing, all of a sudden, some of them became out of reach because the collectors with lots of money all of a sudden entered this new game with a whole bunch more money than it took to necessarily buy an old Mustang or Camaro or whatever. And now, a Hemi Superbird is a $250,000 car. Granted, that's a very, very unique one, but I mean, it got to the point where even a very clean muscle car was 5 figures. You couldn't touch one even if it needed some repair. Now, since then, the reality has come back and you can do things. But I think you see collectors with lots of money enter different areas once the ones that they're in become prohibitively too expensive.
Yeah. And with a bit of luck, that's where watches are bouncing off now.
Yeah. And it's also the weird and wonderful, like I think there's a small a small but significant audience who are in the game to make this kind of investment class. I think for me, the bit that always makes me laugh is I've never ever bought watches on the basis of how much am I paying and how much might it be worth. I don't think it's ever entered my head in regards to when I have gone to buy something, thought, will this be worth more than I'm paying for it? Ever. There's some that I've thought, oh, actually, this might hold some value or whatever, but actually that doesn't care to me. But the reason I was laughing when Pete brought that up was this watch that I'm about to show you is one that I bought randomly because, I mean, this is it here. This is a G-Shock, and this is the 50th anniversary for the Big Mac. So, it has a Big Mac on the back for the 50th anniversary. Awesome. And it's got a Big Mac on the strap. And this cost me the grand sum of £50 UK. 50 UK pounds. And I was wearing it, and I made the mistake of a couple of weeks ago, someone said to me, they're quite sought after by G-Shock collectors. And I looked, and this is a 3,000% profit margin if I decide to sell it. Because they're currently trading for in and around £1,600 to £2,000. And you're just like, what kind of idiots out there? Now, that is not the value proposition by any stretch of the imagination. 50 quid is a value proposition, not so much at the... But, watch collecting is weird. People are truly... I mean, we are weird, but there is truly weirder people out there than us.
Yeah, I mean, I've reviewed more G-Shock. I'm just doing another G-Shock review. I've reviewed more G-Shocks this year than any other watch. I mean, I think that's the... I mean, they've always been collectible, haven't they, G-Shocks? But if you've got a...
sadly...
modest budget, there is some cool ones. I mean, I've got the white NASA G-Shock over there as well, which is going off to Todd V, because he works for NASA. So, but yeah, it's really interesting.
That little puppy.
Yeah, look at that.
Actually, the new DW 6900 version.
Nice.
The brand new one. Yeah, so it looks like you weren't the only one there, Pete. Jack saying he came to watch collecting from cars. Cars are a hassle.
Yeah,
cars are expensive.
Cars are, and also especially depending, there's two different ways of doing cars. There's two different ways of doing vintage watches. You can be that. Sorry, my dog has decided that it is definitely time to go for a run this morning. If you're into classic cars, there's two different ways you can go. You can go the Concours, Pebble Beach, keep everything vintage, keep everything numbers matching, and be really dull and boring. or you can take that car and go race it. And who cares if the numbers still match? If I can make this go a little bit faster, if I can make it handle a little bit nicer, if I can make this lighter, who gives a rat's about the fact that it didn't come with a roll cage? You can do exactly the same in vintage watches. There's the Eric Wins of the world that want all their numbers to match and want everything lined up. But then there's the people that say, you know what, I'm just going to buy this assuming it's been redialed, assuming it's got a service back, assuming that, you know, it's been polished, but it is so much fun and I'm going to wear it all the time. I don't think we've seen the widespread emergence of that kind of vintage watch collector yet. Vintage watch collecting is still stuck in this kind of everything has to match, everything has to line up, everything has to be perfect, and it's going to explode one day and it's going to become fun.
Yeah, it's like patina. Patina is the bit that gets me with vintage watches, where patina is a valued commodity, and you're just like, in no other vintage area ever has patina been seen as a good thing. You know, like nobody buys and pays premium money with more patina. You know, I think that's generally called rust in the car industry, and like, you know, it generally devalues whatever you're trying to buy. And in paint, look, if half the paint is missing or it's faded because it was in the sun for too long, double the value. Sounds like a bargain.
Yeah,
You know,
although there is a couple. There was a Ferrari, I remember, they sold it, and it still had, or it might have been like a Maserati 300M, really, really rare car. And
I mean, the magic word was there, Pete. Rare.
Yeah, and it still had like some rub on the back from where it had kissed the tires. It still had the sort of the rubber debris from the tires that sprayed up the side of the car from like its last race back in the 1950s, and they've never even washed it. That's glorious.
But you're paying for rarity, not for the damage. You know, like there's so many watches that there is lots of them out there, but because it's got a better patina, i.e. it's more damaged than the other ones, it becomes more valuable. You know, talking of cars though, if you really want to lose a lot of money really quickly, go rallying.
Oh yeah. Oh, no, actually, rallying
Formula One budget banger car attitude.
No, if you really want to spend money fast, drag racing.
Oh, but that's just gross. That's not racing. That's just running in a straight line really quickly. That's like saying 100-meter sprinters are athletes. They're not.
Yeah, no, I got to the point of doing just some little local autocross, motocross type stuff, and going like rallying was the next step up, and just even just for a hobbyist, too expensive, too hard. You've got to have a navigator.
Doing it for many years, it is the most. Watches seems positively sensible after I've been rallying. Let's
try sailing. Sailing will. I thought car racing was expensive. If you're a serious sailboater and you want to race, that's a big bucket of money that you pour down that thing. That's outrageous.
I thought sailing was really cheap. I turn up. Someone else has already bought the boat. I turn up. I jump on it. I go sailing. He takes me out for lunch afterwards. And I leave.
That's the equivalent of wearing
the rest of it.
That's the equivalent of wearing your mate's watch at dinner, isn't it? You roll up, your mate's already bought the Grubel Forze. You wear it for lunch, and you think, "All right, see you later then."
When you get off the boat,
you just summed up
that guy.
You just summed up my entire boat racing history.
Powerboat racing.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
No, I've somehow managed to convince work once that I had to take every Wednesday off to go take part in the Sydney Harbour midweek madness racing. It was great fun.
Oh, wow.
It's
there
we go.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I just saw the time. I have to go to work, fellas.
No worries.
Run with your dog.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for watching. Very much appreciated. Yes, and thank you for all the comments in the comment section, and big thanks to the panel. And we'll see you all next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks.
Peace out.
Take care.